things and post the podcast until I realized something. There were some technical issues in it, and I could have just posted it and gone to bed in the off season. But that's not how we do things here on Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, live streamers, and hello, baseball fans, and hello, people listening to me on the YouTubes and on your podcasting catchers. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast, even in the off season. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host. I don't think I'm a perfectionist, but I know what I want, and I want to deliver it to you. Who am I? I'm Paul Francis Sullivan. You can call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been baseball podcasting for over a decade now and just finished four completed seasons here at the Locked On Podcast Network. You can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. You follow me on Twitter as long as Twitter's still around. I will be there. Can't figure out that mastodon. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Be sure to tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On MLB and check out some of the other great shows on the Locked On Podcast Network, including Locked On Pirates with our friend of the podcast, Ethan Smith. Now, why did I pick Ethan right now? Because Ethan and I recorded earlier today, and unbeknownst to me, there was a gigantic tech problem with the sound that I couldn't hear when it was happening. And Ethan posted the show on the Locked On Pirates feed. So if you want to hear it, it's on the Locked On Pirates feed. But I got really, when I heard the sound issues that I was having, and we were actually having modem issues here in my home, I felt badly. I felt badly that Ethan and I recorded a very good show. It was a lot of fun. But I was like, it doesn't sound very good. And I thought, well, I recorded it, better post it. I said, nope. You all deserve better. So that show does exist. It's not wasted. It's on the Locked On Pirates feed. If you want to hear it, subscribe to Locked On Pirates. I have. And you can listen to that show, which I'm calling the lost episode of Locked On. But it's not lost. It exists. It's published. It's published on a different feed. But I've decided to give you a brand new show right now. I don't have a guest. It's too late to book a guest for today. I got another podcast that is going to be dropping this one's dropping on Wednesday, the 23rd. I got one that is already recorded for Thanksgiving and one's already recorded for Friday. So, I just wanted to get this right. I didn't want to have something I felt badly about. It's quality control. Hey, let's take a quick peek at some of the stuff that's happening in baseball right now. Hunter Renfroe. Remember Hunter Renfroe? Hunter Renfroe was traded to the Angels. He's played for a bunch of teams. He has bounced around a little bit. He played for the Red Sox for an hour and a half, long enough to become a little bit of a fan favorite because he wound up playing well in for a team that got to within 2 wins of the World Series. The former Padres player played for the 2020 Tampa Bay Rays, played in the World Series with the Rays, got a couple of key hits in the series against Tampa, his former teammate in Tampa Bay, including that weird ball that ricocheted off of him in the American League Division Series. Excuse me. And had a terrible ALCS for Boston against the Astros. Was traded in Milwaukee for Jackie Bradley Jr. when Jackie Bradley Jr. made his return to the Red Sox. And now it looks like he's been traded to the Angels. And the trade for the Angels meant that the Brewers are getting Elvis Peguero, a young right-handed pitcher who pitched a little bit in the majors. Adam Seminaris, who is a minor leaguer who pitched very well in single A, has made it all the way up to triple A. And Jansen Junk. And look at Jansen Junk only played a handful of games in the major leagues for the Angels. He's now off to Milwaukee. What a name, Jansen Junk. I mean, doesn't that sound like that sounds like either like a name you would hear in like hardball or a video game for baseball where they couldn't get the rights to the players and they need someone to be a junk ball pitcher. So like the avatar for Jamie Moyer would be Jansen Junk, a junk ball pitcher. I love that name. First of all, I love alliteration. I think junk is a funny sounding word. Jansen Junk, there you go. I mean, it's a fine trade for the Angels. I mean, Hunter Renfroe seems like he'll be will he be a good fit? Sure. Sure. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. You know, the Angels are doing a bunch of things. I mean, they acquired Renfroe. They've been a little bit aggressive. They signed Tyler Anderson to a 3-year contract. Remember, Tyler Anderson was an all-star this year for the Dodgers and was a big reason why they had one of the best regular seasons in their team's history. He pitched pretty well. He pitched 5 shutout innings in his lone start in the postseason against San Diego. Remember, Tyler Anderson was someone who was brought in. It was a first-round pick for the Rockies and was kind of looked upon as like, hey, maybe this is someone who could be developed when the Rockies. Remember, the Rockies were actually pretty good in 2017 and 2018. You know, they made the playoffs both of those years. If they won one more game, if the Rockies won one more GD game in 2018, they would have been a division champion and had been in a pretty good setup to maybe get to the league championship series. Instead, they tied the Dodgers, lost the one-game playoff, and they wound up winning the wild card game against the Cubs, but getting thumped by Milwaukee. And since then, he's been nomadic. He played for the Giants in 2020, split his time between Pittsburgh and Seattle in 2021. Last year, he had a career year with the Dodgers, and now off he goes to the Angels. And the Angels kind of sort of have to do everything. They're adding a little bit of offense to their outfield. You know, we think of the Angels of having, 2 MVPs on their team. Their offense, other than Trout and Ohtani, was pretty rotten last year. So maybe Renfroe is an improvement. I don't know. Tyler Anderson can pitch. So obviously he does something that other members of the Angels can't do. The Angels have to do something. They have to do something because they have the most dynamic player in baseball in Ohtani and the best player in baseball in Trout, and they stink. I think they need to change the managerial because I don't think that Phil Nevin's a long-term solution, but they just stink, and they need to try a little bit of everything as they're playing whack-a-mole. You'd hate to see Trout be someone who plays his entire career with a team and never sniffs a World Series. But he's been there for a decade now. And so they have to try a little bit of this and a little bit of that to try to somehow make a sauce that'll work well with Trout. Speaking of MVPs who've never won a World Series, Aaron Judge while I'm recording this, is in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's from Northern California. Just so you know, not everything north of Los Angeles is the Bay Area. But Aaron Judge is close enough to the Bay Area that he will be embraced as if he is Ghirardelli Chocolate and Fisherman's Wharf and Haight-Ashbury rolled into one and sent down to Silicon Valley to be put into the cloud if he signs with the San Francisco Giants. Giants are as good a landing spot as any for Aaron Judge. I still think LA is a truly intriguing spot. I don't think he's leaving the Yankees. But then again, I've been dead wrong before on lots of free agents. And he could be looking around going like, you know what? I have a better chance of getting to the World Series if I'm in San Francisco or Los Angeles because of the dysfunctional front office. You got a dysfunctional front office in Anaheim. You got a dysfunctional front office in the Bronx. And with all the talent and everything they have there, does anyone think the Yankees are going to go to the World Series next year? Probably not. And maybe that's what he's saying. It's his right to do it. Now, I think the Yankees would be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs if they let him go, if they skedaddle. But hey, good for Aaron Judge for betting on himself. That doesn't always work. Nomar Garciaparra turned down a huge contract from the Red Sox, betting on himself, and injuries caught up with him. No one's going to cry for Nomar. He's a millionaire many times over, but he never got that big, huge honking deal. Same thing for Juan Gonzalez. Remember Juan Gonzalez won the MVP 2 times and then was offered a big, huge Brinks truck contract from the Rangers, and he said, no, I'm going to test free agency. And it didn't work out well for him. He never got that big chance again. Sometimes you bet on yourself, it doesn't work. Sometimes you bet on yourself, and it doesn't work, and sometimes it works out great. And sometimes you play it safe. And by the way, at this time of the year, it's time to think about safety and SimpliSafe. Did you know over the holidays, property crimes and like burglaries and package theft spiked nationally? That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system, so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your SimpliSafe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, the third year in a row. An emergency 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real so you can get priority police response. SimpliSafe is home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. With a top-rated SimpliSafe app, stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere. Arm or disarm, lock for guests, access your cameras, or adjust the settings. Don't miss your chance to save big on the best security system out there. Get 50% off of any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. It's the biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. For those of you who listen to this show a lot, as I kept saying, betting on, how many of you thought I was about to go into the BetOnline read? I juked you out there. I'm going to bring up something that I first wrote about this about 12 years ago when I just had a blog. I didn't have a full-fledged podcast at that point. But I'm always fascinated by postseason MVPs. And I talked a little bit this year about the fact that Jeremy Pena, who had a wonderful season and a wonderful postseason, got the key home run to sink the Seattle Mariners in the division series, was the ALCS MVP against the New York Yankees, and helped the Astros clinch the World Series against Philadelphia. And Jeremy Pena joined a unique fraternity of players who have won the League Championship Series and World Series MVP in the same year. And there is no doubt in my mind that Jeremy Pena was the MVP of the Astros this postseason. That being said, as I said before, I felt that Framber Valdez should have been the World Series MVP. Why? His two performances came at critical points. He pitched wonderfully in games 2 and in the clinching game 6, giving critical wins to the Astros, of which, if he came up short in either end, it is a much different World Series. Again, I'm not taking anything away from Jeremy Pena, but I truly thought the most valuable player for the Astros was Valdez. Now, that may be nitpicking, and the champagne tastes just as nice, I'm sure, for Valdez as it does for Pena, but the MVP is the person who kind of put their biggest thumbprint on the series, as the person you think of as the great hero of that series. And it's funny, there have been some all-time great players who have never won the MVP, some who have World Series rings. Just to be clear, the World Series MVP, as we now have it, began in the mid 1950s. There were awards that were given out beforehand. I don't have those stats in front of me. So I'm just starting from the current incarnation of the postseason MVPs. Started in 1955 with the Brooklyn Dodgers' Johnny Padres winning. The next year went to Don Larson, who threw the perfect game. Kind of sort of easy pick there. By the way, if Christian Javier pitched game 7, if there was a game 7, if he pitched well and got the win in game 7, you would have to give it to him because he started the second no-hitter in World Series history. I digress. Along the way, there have been times where some truly unlikely players have won. There have been some obscure players who have won the World Series MVP or the League Championship Series MVP award. Not a lot of people knew who Randy Arozarena was when the American League Championship Series started in 2020. Not a lot of people knew who Livan Hernandez was when the strike zone was expanded by Eric Gregg. There have been some obscure ones, and there have been superstars. Hall of Famers have won League Championship Series and World Series MVPs. Frank Robinson won it one year. Derek Jeter won it one year. Mariano Rivera won it one year. Reggie Jackson won it with 2 different teams, the A's and the Yankees. Now, sometimes they get it completely right. There's no getting around. Oral Hershiser was the MVP of the 1988 World Series, or that Madison Bumgarner was in 2014. Sometimes it's just dominant. Sometimes it seems like a team effort, and the person who winds up winning is, give it to them. But, excuse me, could have probably gone to several Cubs in 2016 along with Ben Zobrist. Sometimes they just get it wrong. Sometimes they whiff. Sometimes there's someone who I think, wait a minute, this other person is clearly the most valuable player, and they're not getting it. Excuse my cough there, video people. Now, let's just go back, a little trip down memory lane and nitpick, because you know what? Sometimes it's good to nitpick and point out some of the people who should have won. And I'm going to go all the way back to 1960. Now, the actual winner of the 1960 World Series MVP was Yankee second baseman Bobby Richardson. He had a tremendous series. He batted .367. His OPS is 1.0454, but they didn't know that in 1960. He got 11 hits in 7 games, and he drove in 12 runs in 7 games. That's unbelievable. Here's the reason why, even though his stats were spectacular, the Yankees lost that series. And it was the first time, and so far the only time, the World Series MVP went to a player on the losing team. And look at, as wonderful as Bobby Richardson's series was, it was a bizarre World Series where the Yankees outplayed the Pirates left and right in every facet of the World Series, except wins. The Yankees won 3 blowout games, and the Pirates won 4 close ones. And I hate to sound like Scrooge here, but if your team loses the World Series, then there was someone on the other team who was more valuable. Now, I will contradict that because there are 2 instances later on where I felt giving the MVP to a player on the losing team was the right thing to do. But in this case, Richardson piled on in some of the blowout games, and Bill Mazeroski batted .320. His OPS was 960. Was a tremendous defensive presence in the infield, and he hit 2 home runs. And I think if you're a baseball historian, you know the second home run he hit clinched the World Series, and it remains the only time that Game 7 of a World Series was won with a home run. That's your most valuable player. Not the person padding the stats in a blowout, but the one who actually clinched it. Again, Mazeroski, I'm sure, was fine with the, the consolation prize of a World Series ring and eventually a trip to the Hall of Fame. I'm going to go to 1969. The Miracle Mets, Don Clendenin, won the MVP as the Mets defeated the Orioles, and still one of the most shocking World Series results of all time. Again, there's no doubt Clendenon had a remarkable series at the plate. He homered 3 times in 5 games. He batted .357. His OPS was 1.509. He was fantastic. However, I think there was someone who outshone him, and that was Jerry Koosman. Jerry Koosman pitched a critical Game 2 victory. The Orioles had beaten Tom Seaver in Game 1, and everyone was predicting that Baltimore was going to win that series. Seaver losing Game 1. If the Mets lose Game 2, and the Orioles would probably steamroll to the World Series title. But Koosman won Game 2, and then after a Game 4 thriller, Koosman came in and threw a complete game victory in the clinching Game 5, being the pitcher on the mound to win. Now, maybe the MVP voters were eager to award a hitter because there was always the MVP awards in the World Series seem to always go to a dominant pitcher, whether it was Bob Gibson or Sandy Koufax or Mickey Lolich. The only between and Whitey Ford, between 1961 and 1969, Don Clendenon and Frank Robinson were the only hitters to win a World Series MVP. So maybe it's like, all right, enough with all the pitchers. But you know what? Koosman should have won that. 1978 is interesting. Bucky Dent won the World Series MVP. And maybe there was lingering hero worship after the Dent home run against Boston. Maybe he got a couple of key RBIs in Game 6 that padded the stats. But the colossus of that World Series was Reggie Jackson. The year before his home run sunk the Dodgers, Bob Welch struck out Jackson in a memorable ending of Game 2. He won games the entire series with singles to prolong rally. He got a key home run. He homered twice. He batted .391, and his OPS is 1.196. He should have been the World Series MVP. Again, using the Coen brothers rule, which is if someone's already won multiple awards, I can't cry they don't pad their resume. But Reggie would have been the first person to win back-to-back World Series MVPs. Quite frankly, I think he earned it. No offense to Bucky Dent. Oh, wait a minute. I'm a native New Englander. All the offense to Bucky Dent. By the way, native New Englander that I am, Fred Lynn is one of my favorite players of all time, and he won the 1982 American League Championship Series. And again, his stats were obscene. He batted .611 in the 5-game series for the Angels. His OPS was 1.539. But say it with me, the Angels lost. They lost, which means that someone on the Brewers was doing something to lead his team. And that person, I think, was Paul Molitor, who batted .316 with a 1.065 OPS. He drove in as many runs as Lynn, and then he wound up getting a huge home run off of Mike Witt in Game 3. And he drove in the series tying run he drove the winning run in the series tying Game 4 and went 2 for 3 with a run scored in the pennant clincher. Look, no offense, Fred Lynn, I love you, but Molitor should have got that. Now, this is one that they did get right. Mike Scott is the first of the 2 playoff MVPs for losing teams that I think they got the right person. Mike Scott was on a losing Astros team in 1986, and the Astros didn't even get to Game 7. But Mike Scott, scuffing the ball or not, got complete game victories in Games 1 and 4 and was ready to go in Game 7. And that Game 6 was a 16-inning marathon where the Mets had to win because they know they wouldn't be able to face their former teammate Mike Scott in a Game 7. So I believe he towered over that World Series or over that League Championship Series with everyone knowing that his winning would clinch a pennant for the Astros. So I did agree. That's one that they did get right. I'll get to the other one later who they didn't give it to a player on the losing team. 1987 was interesting because, well, the postseason MVP awards for the League Championship Series, National League, American League, and World Series, I felt were all wrong. All of them were wrong. In the ALCS, it was a little bit of first impression bias. Gary Gaetti hit 2 home runs in the opening game for the Twins against the Tigers, and the Tigers were put on their heels, and the Twins won the series in 5. But guess what? Gaetti cooled down after the 2 home run opener, and Tom Brunansky heated up. He matched Gaetti's home run total. He out-hit him. Brunansky batted .412. Gaetti batted .300. Brunansky had a better OPS, 1.542 to Gaetti's 998. Brunansky drove in more runs. And in the clinching game 5, Brunansky started the scoring with an RBI double in the second and then homered in the 9th. And they still gave it, not one stat did Gaetti top Brunansky. And Brunansky was hottest on the road, and yet they gave it to Gaetti. Go figure. Meanwhile, in the National League, Jeffrey Leonard, with 1 flap down, hitting 4 home runs for the Giants, got the League Championship Series MVP. But say it with me, the Giants lost. And Leonard was a no-show as the Giants were completely shut out in Game 6 and 7. Game 7 was won by Danny Cox, who threw a complete game victory and got a hard luck loss in Game 4, which he lost 1-0. Cox was the MVP of that series. And in the World Series, they gave it to Frank Viola of the Twins, who undeniably was great in Games 1 and the clinching Game 7, but he got hammered in Game 4. He didn't even make it out of the 4th. A series MVP should make it out of the 4th. Kirby Puckett batted .357, got 10 hits, and he got the key double that tied Game 7 of the World Series, taking Frank Viola off the hook of what would have been his second World Series loss. But you know what? I guess they just put all their money on Frank Viola pitching so beautifully in that clinching game. And I bet it would be a surefire bet that any player who pitched so beautifully in the clinching game was going to get the MVP, because that's how people look at him. If you're going to make any bets, guess where you should go? You should go to BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. For the latest odds and trends in every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, esports, we got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can get those at BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Let's go over some of the other ones here. Some are kind of nitpicky. Jose Rio was brilliant in games 1 and 4 of the 1990 World Series. I think the fact that Billy Hatcher batted .625 with an OPS over 2.0, and the fact that Chris Sabo hit 2 huge home runs to put the Reds ahead, probably earned them the World Series MVP. But, give it to Rio. Now, it's going to bring me to 1997, where I'll say it. Oh, let me get rid of this here. I will say in 1997, we had the single worst World Series MVP ever, ever, ever. Livan Hernandez, whose entire reputation being a big game pitcher is based upon the fact that Eric Gregg's strike zone was insane. I'll say it. He won 2 games in the World Series. Good for you. And one of them he pitched 8 innings. Great. But he was mediocre in his first game, and his World Series ERA was 5.27. Your World Series MVP has an ERA in the 5s in games where he got gigantic run support? Come on. The MVP of that World Series was hands down Moises Alou, who batted .321. His OPS was over 1,000. He hit 3 home runs. He drove in 9 in 7 games. He got the huge 3-run home run in Game 1, got a huge run batted in Game 5, and hit the single that sparked the rally in the 9th inning comeback of Game 7. I remember watching that World Series. This is the Moises Alou coronation. But nope. Went to Livan Hernandez. Now, his brother, El Duque Hernandez, won the ALCS MVP in 1999 against the Red Sox. I personally would have given it to Ramiro Mendoza. Yes, Mendoza only pitched 2 games out of the bullpen, but those were two games where the series was on the line. With the bases loaded, one out in the eighth inning, and the Yankees cling to a one-run lead, Mendoza came out of the bullpen and struck out Husky and Offerman to get got Offerman to get him out to end a critical rally. He came the same situation in Game 5, where the Red Sox were rallying and the specter of Pedro Martinez start coming up, and Torrey had him come out and he got out of the rally. And in fact, Torrey saw what a great series he had. It was Mendoza who clinched the World Series out. In 2001, Craig Counsell had a wonderful series, but come on, Randy Johnson, who threw a complete game shutout in Game 1 and then pitched the clincher game against Tom Glavine. If you beat both Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine in the same series, you're the MVP of that series. Now, it's funny. Another one of the real head scratchers, like Brunansky not winning and Gaetti getting the MVP award, happened with the 2005 White Sox. Paul Konerko won the ALCS MVP. Okay, fine. And he got some big home runs against the Angels. But Joe Crede topped Konerko in almost every category and had some big hits, including the walk-off double in Game 2 after the weird A.J. Pierzynski shenanigans. He had the two-run single in Game 4 that put the game out of reach. In the clinching, he got the go-ahead hit in the second, a game-tying home run in the seventh, and drove in the pennant-winning run in the eighth. And he had better stats he had all those key hits and better stats than Konerko, and yet it was Konerko who won this MVP. Matt Garza won the ALCS MVP for the 2008 Rays. And again, he beat the Red Sox twice, including the Game 7 clincher. But the Rays beat the Red Sox because of their bats. And their bats went berserk in Games 2, 3, and 4. And it was, at the time, B.J. Upton. Later became, Melvin Upton Jr., he batted .321. His OPS was over 1,000. He homered 4 times. He drove in 11 runs in 7 games. I'm sorry. That award belonged to B.J. Upton, not to Matt Garza. Which brings us to, I think, the most egregious recent bad decisions in a postseason MVP. And worse than what we saw this year with Framber Valdez not getting the World Series MVP. And that was Yasiel Puig. Yasiel Puig did not win the NLCS MVP in 2018, despite getting the huge back-breaking home run to help sink the Brewers, despite batting .333, despite having an OPS of .983. It went to Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger, who, again, got a couple of key hits, I'll grant you, but he also he batted 200, okay? Again, I know batting average is not the end-all, be-all, but if he got one fewer hit, he'd be below the Mendoza line in a 7-game series. Fine. His on-base percentage was .231, okay? His OPS was .591. He drove in 4 runs with his single home run, and he had 2 extra base hits the entire series. Bellinger had a couple of good games and had an okay series, and he was the MVP over Yasiel Puig. I don't understand. I don't always understand. And then came Valdez. There were some years where they gave multiple MVPs. I always think that's a little bit of cheating, but there you go. The only other one I'll bring up, it's the only other time that I think the World Series MVP should have gone to a player on the losing team, was Barry Bonds in the 2002 World Series. Like how Mike Scott loomed over that series against the Mets. Look at Troy Glaus won the World Series MVP that year. There's no getting around Troy Glaus had a fantastic World Series. His OPS was over 1.3, hit 3 home runs, drove in 8 runs, got the key hit in the Game 6 comeback. I get it. Bonds, you like batting average? He batted .471. You like on-base percentage? His on-base percentage was 700. He got on base 7 out of every 10 times. His OPS was almost 2,000 in a 7-game series. He homered twice. He reached base in a 7-game series. Say it with me, folks. 21 times. He reached base 21 times in a 7-game series. That's how you get an on-base percentage of 700. If that's not an MVP, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. Maybe I'm an MVP of podcasting because I listened to the bad audio and I said, I need to do something. And I remember this is a topic I've been thinking a little bit about, and I figured, why not share it with you all? It's the off season. It's a time for discussions. Has there been a time that you remember that the postseason MVP went to the absolute wrong person? Let me know. Send it to me at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, on Instagram. Send it to me at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And hey, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen. What should your second listen be? Well, let me tell you. Your second listen should be Locked On MLB Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts' insight that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today. It's available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming in to make sure that you have the best sounding podcast that I can give you. Hopefully there's no sound issues on this one. I don't have the energy to do a third today. This has been Locked On MLB for the 23rd day of November, 2022. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.